Levi was dead at the scene. When investigators arrived, they found Karl Karlsson throwing himself against the barn walls, laying on the ground, sobbing. Law enforcement spent time consoling Karl. He was that distraught. And here's the thing in this part of upstate New York. Farming accidents are common. Equipment fails, jacks slip, trucks fall. The medical examiner was called. He looked at the scene, he signed off. No autopsy was ordered. Case closed, accidental death. Levi Karlsson, son of Karl Karlsson, was dead, and the case was buried almost as fast as he was. Quieter, more direct. If you're watching this right now and your stomach is already turning good, that means you're paying attention. Subscribe to Daily Crime Case if you haven't already hit that button right now, because what comes next in this story is the part that detectives couldn't believe when they heard it. We're just getting started. Here's the thing about grief, sometimes it leaves room for doubt. Cindy loved Karl. She'd built a life with him. She'd married him knowing his painful past, and she'd chosen to believe in him anyway. When Levi died, she mourned alongside her husband. But something wouldn't let her rest. It started small, just a feeling. A thought that crept in at 3 in the morning and refused to leave. She'd replay things, small things. The night of the barn fire, Karl had woken her up and said he could hear the crackling from their bedroom window. But Cindy had been awake too. She hadn't heard anything, and she knew to see the barn from their window, you had to turn and look back. You couldn't just glance out. You had to know to look. She thought about the truck, the one nobody used. Why did Levi need to work on it that day? She thought about Levi's nightmares, his mother screaming, his father getting out with the kids but not with her. She thought about Karl's first wife and the boarded window and the 3 different stories. She started losing sleep, having panic attacks, berating herself for even thinking it. She told a friend everything, every suspicion, every piece, and she said, "Please, just tell me I'm crazy. I'd rather be crazy than right." Her friend couldn't tell her that, and then the phone rang. Police. They'd been alerted by another family member. They wanted Cindy to come in. She said later that when she heard that, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: relief. Detectives needed more than suspicion. They needed Karl's own words. And Cindy, terrified but determined, volunteered to get them. She agreed to meet Karl alone at a restaurant. Before she walked in, she tucked a small voice recorder into her bra, pressed it flat, and steadied herself. She sat across from the man she'd married, the man she'd had a child with, the man she now believed had killed his own son. She asked him directly, "Did you push the truck?" And Karl Karlsson, sitting across a lunch table from his wife, told her that yes, he had pushed the truck. He even demonstrated the motion with his hands. He said he saw the opportunity and took advantage of it. Cindy drove straight to the police station. But when investigators played back the recording, nothing. Muffled noise. You couldn't make out a single word. The recording was useless. Cindy had just heard her husband confess to murdering his son, and she had nothing to show for it. So detectives asked her to do it again. This time it was official. Detectives set up a controlled operation, real equipment, real surveillance. Cindy would meet Karl one more time at Abigail's restaurant in Seneca Falls, and she would steer the conversation back to Levi. She said Karl seemed suspicious from the moment he sat down. He was watching her differently. Something was off, and he knew it. So Cindy did something bold. She offered to let him search her purse. He looked at it, thought about it, and declined. That was enough. He relaxed. And Cindy, steady as stone, asked him again. "I asked you if you pushed the truck." "Karl, I didn't push the truck. But I said I took advantage of the situation once it happened." "Karl, you told me that you didn't set it up that way, but when you were in there, you saw the opportunity." "Karl, no. After it had happened, then I saw the opportunity. Read that back if you need to." His son was trapped under a truck, still alive. And Karl Karlsson, standing right there, looked at that moment and saw an opportunity. He didn't jack the truck back up. He didn't call for help. He didn't scream. He walked out of the garage, got in the car, and told Cindy they were leaving. Detectives listening to that recording said it stopped them cold. There is no way you can spin that to be anything other than cold-hearted. No empathy. He obviously didn't feel bad about that night. What you just heard, that's not the worst of it. Because while detectives were processing that confession, they started pulling on another thread. And what unraveled underneath changed the entire shape of this case. Don't go anywhere. Karl Karlsson loved to talk. When investigators brought him in, he wasn't defensive, he wasn't quiet. He was almost eager. He sat down in that room and he talked. What killed him? The truck. How did the truck kill him? It landed on him. But detectives aren't just looking for what a person says they're watching for, where a story starts to bend. And Karl's story bent. Over hours of interrogation, the version shifted. Karl admitted he'd been inside the truck when it tipped. He'd opened the door to reach the linkage. The truck fell, and then he left. The truck fell on your son, and instead of jacking it back up, you ran? Carl's answer was almost casual. He said it didn't register. Said it was like a kid who breaks a window and just runs, doesn't want to get caught. Detectives pushed harder. You caused the truck to fall on him, and you left him dying on the floor. Carl. Yeah, that's what happened. Not a breakdown. Not tears. Just a flat, quiet acknowledgement like he was confirming a grocery order. One detective described it this way. He said it like it was the weather. And then came the question about the insurance policy. The $700. Who's in life insurance policy, the one Levi had set up through his job, with Karl listed as sole beneficiary, because Levi didn't trust his ex-wife to manage money for their daughters. Did the insurance policy have anything to do with it? Karl, nothing. I never even thought of it at the time. But detectives had already pulled the numbers, and the numbers told a very different story. Let's slow down right here, because this part of the story deserves to be laid out clearly. Over the span of Karl Karlsen's adult life, every tragedy he experienced was also a financial transaction. A brand new car catches fire in his driveway, $10,000. His first wife, Christina, dies in a house fire. Trapped in a bathroom with a boarded window, $200,000, policy taken out weeks before her death. 3 prized Belgian horses die in a barn fire. Karl heard through a window his wife couldn't hear from $115,000. His son Levi is crushed under a truck in his garage, $700,000. Karl was the sole beneficiary, total over $1 million. One man, one lifetime. Every person and thing he lost paid out. But detectives weren't done. Because when they dug deeper into Karlsen's financial arrangements, they found something that made even seasoned investigators go quiet. Levi's 2 daughters, Karl's own grandchildren, had life insurance policies on them. $350,000, each child, without their mother's knowledge. And in the weeks before Cindy left him, Karl had been pushing hard to get those girls over for a visit. Detectives later said Cindy leaving when she did may have saved her own life. Karl stood to collect over $1 million if she died. One officer put it plainly. He covered his victims with insurance. Before I give you the ending, what's the most shocking part of this case for you so far? The wire? The insurance on the grandkids? The confession that sounded like a weather report? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And while you're down there, hit subscribe. New cases go up every week, and I promise you, the next one is just as dark. Karl Karlsen was charged with murder in the 2nd degree for the death of his son Levi. And then on the eve of his murder trial, he called the cops himself. He was ready to plead guilty. In a New York courtroom, a judge walked Karl through the formal plea. 3 questions, simple ones. Did you know that when you enticed him underneath this truck, you were putting his life at risk?
Yes.
Did you cause the truck to fall on him?
Yes.
Did you leave while he was still alive, knowing it would result in his death? Yes. A detective who was present said he answered like he was giving directions. Karl Karlsen was sentenced to 15 years to life in a New York State prison. And then California made its move, charging him with the murder of his first wife, Christina, in that house fire decades earlier. Karl pleaded not guilty. That case is still working through the courts. Cindy, when asked if there was a word for what Karl is, said this: evil, diabolical. They're just not strong enough words. He's not human. But I want to end this story somewhere else. Not with Karl, not with the insurance money, not with the guilty plea. I want to end with 2 little girls, Levi's daughters. The grandchildren Karl had secretly insured. The ones whose lives detectives believe were quietly being positioned as the next transaction. A couple of days before Christmas, their mother brought them to the police precinct in Seneca Falls. She walked in through the front door, a daughter on each side, and she said to the officers waiting there, I wanted my daughters to meet the people who saved their lives. That's it. That's the whole moment. No speeches, no ceremony. Just a mother and 2 little girls, and the people who stood between them and a man who had already decided what they were worth. Levi never got that protection. Christina never got that protection. But those girls did. A restaurant, table for 2, a wife nervous, barely breathing, sitting across from her husband. And tucked inside her bra, a wire she leans in. She asked him point blank, Karl, did you push the truck? And he doesn't flinch, he doesn't panic, he doesn't deny it. He leans back in his chair, look her in the eyes and say, I saw the opportunity, and I took advantage of it. His son. He's talking about his son. The son he claimed to love. The son he said he'd do anything for. The son who died, crushed under a truck, while his own father walked out of the garage and did nothing. My name isn't today on Daily Crime Case. We're going back to Seneca Falls, New York, to a man whose luck never seemed to run out because he was manufacturing it himself. Seneca Falls, New York. If you've never been, picture this. Rolling green hills, quiet streets, the kind of town where people still wave to strangers from their porches. It sits in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, a place that genuinely feels like things are supposed to work out, like the land itself has a kind of promise to it. And for Karl Karlsen, it really seemed like they had. By the time Karl settled in Seneca Falls with his second wife Cindy and their blended family, he'd already built a reputation as something of a local legend. Not the flashy kind. Quiet. Kind. The kind people respect. See, Karl had a story. Years before, back in Northern California, his first wife Christina had died in a house fire. A tragedy. A nightmare. But Karl ran back into that fire. He pulled his kids out of the flames. He was called a hero in the local paper, and he had the clippings to prove it. People who knew him say he carried that article with him. Showed it to folks he'd just met. But here's the thing that nobody thought to ask at the time. If Karl fought his way through that fire, where were his burns? There weren't any. Real quick before we go any further, drop where you're watching from down in the comments. Doesn't matter if it's 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning, I want to know where you're tuning in from. People watching this from all 50 states right now, and honestly, this case hits different depending on where you live. I'll tell you why in a minute. Now, back to Karl. Here's what nobody in Seneca Falls knew when Karl first arrived. Bad things had a habit of following Karl Karlsen around, and those bad things had a habit of paying. It started small, or at least small enough to explain away. A brand new car, Karl's car, burns up in his own driveway. Now look, cars catch fire. It happens. But a witness later told investigators something strange. They'd seen Karl cleaning out the car right before it went up in flames. Just clearing his things. Like he knew he wouldn't need them. That car paid out $10,000. Then came Christina. Karl's first wife died in their California home in a fire that investigators initially ruled an accident. But looking back, and investigators did look back, things didn't add up. The fire started near the bathroom. Christina was found inside it, dead. The window boarded up. Karl told police he'd boarded it up months earlier. Witnesses said it happened the morning of the fire, maybe the day before. And the story Karl told? He didn't tell one story. He told 3, a different version to the medical examiner, a different one to the police, and another to the fire investigators. In one version, the family dogs had knocked over a kerosene heater days earlier, soaked the clothes on the floor, and a spark from a dryer ignited it. In another, he'd tried to reach her through the flames but couldn't get to her because they were too high. He even told someone he had burns from trying to save her. He had no burns. The case was ruled accidental. Karl collected $200,000 on her life insurance policy, a policy taken out within weeks of her death, on a man who, by all accounts, was barely making minimum wage. And here in Seneca Falls, none of that history followed him. He arrived clean, a widower, a hero, a man who'd been through enough. People felt sorry for Karl Karlsen. Cindy felt sorry for Karl Karlsen. Now I need you to understand something about Levi before we go any further. Because Levi isn't just a name in this story. Levi is the reason this story matters. Levi was Karl's son from his first marriage, the marriage that ended in that California fire. He was just a boy when it happened, young enough that the trauma didn't fade. It lived in him. People close to Levi said there wasn't a night he didn't wake up drenched in sweat, crying. He could hear his mother screaming in his sleep. He heard it over and over every night for years. And here's what haunted him most. His father got his sisters out. His father got him out. But his father didn't get his mother out. And Levi could never understand that. He heard her. He knew she was in there. He knew she was screaming. And his father, the man who everyone called a hero, left her behind. That question never left Levi. It just grew up with him. He became a complicated young man, rebellious as a teenager. Lots of arguing, lots of fighting at home. Karl, by most accounts, was hard on him, cold, critical, impossible to please. Levi spent more and more time at the home of Cindy Meckley, his stepmother's friend, just to get out of the house. He wanted his father's approval more than almost anything. He just could never seem to earn it. By the time Levi was in his 20s, he was a divorced dad with 2 little girls of his own to raise. And somewhere in that process, he decided to try and patch things up with Karl, turn over a new leaf, be the son his father wanted him to be. Karl put him to work doing odd jobs around the house, and one afternoon, for $50, Levi agreed to work on Karl's truck. The details of that day are almost unbearably ordinary. Karl gave Levi $50, told him to do some work on a truck that, by Cindy's own account, they almost never used. The truck just sat in the garage. Nobody drove it. Nobody touched it. But that day, Karl needed Levi under it. Karl and Cindy left together. Nothing seemed off. No argument, no tension. They came back 4 hours later. Karl said he was going to check on Levi. He headed toward the garage, and then Cindy heard it. Banging. Frantic. Desperate banging on the side of the house, on the windows. She opened the door. Karl was outside, frantic, screaming, "Call 911. The truck fell on Levi. I think I need an ambulance. Okay, what's going on? The truck fell on my stepson. Are you with your son right now? Yes. He's not alive. Is he breathing? No. Okay, we're going to start CPR. His chest is crushed.